This is the explanatory video for the album titled Ghost Festival, set to take place in the Rubber Room. You've heard me talk about Joss Paper and Ghost Money for a while now, and this is a reference to the actual festival where all of those objects and those ideas stem from. You can see the album art here, which gets to the point. It's just a mock-up, but you can see the currency being cast into the fire and turning into ash. The Ghost Festival is something that happens every year in China and parts of Asia, where people gather to burn this fake currency and give offerings to their ancestors. They even put out fruit and other food at table settings with empty seats so that the ancestors can come and eat it. I know that Chinese people will use this burning of the Joss paper or that ghost money as a sacrifice or a religious ritual before big events. The reason for this title is twofold. It's for the narrative thrust of the album, having to do with fire and transformation and the burning away of ideas and the offering to the future and the sacrificial element of fire. But also it reflects the recording process, which is unique for us, but I think very unique in the recording world. And I'll go into that in just a moment. Now, I want to play with these two ideas of the spirit realm and the real world. And those will be represented physically in the recording process through muting and unmuting. We can assume, like the table setting where the fruit is and the empty chairs, that we are in those empty chairs. We have the fire in the middle in the main room, and then the melody, the cello and horns in the booths. And we are offering our Joss paper, our sacrifice, to the center fire, which is always burning in a sense, where all ideas come from and end up. We can assume that each of us, each member is a potential ghost member in the sense that we are all muted and we are offering up parts. Because what will happen is in the final mix, we'll isolate particular parts and those will begin each song. And that will help us demarcate each song. We also have a song structure, a very loose one, that can help us build, which I'll get into. But essentially, we can pull out specific people and mute other people to build a song retroactively. And that's really important for us because we won't have any songs under our belt. We're not going in with anything to practice or to play, and we haven't played with each other in a while. So this is very good because it'll be very free and open for us. You can actually talk, you can play. We'll just have everything on record, just from start to finish. It'll start to finish will be record, wide open. And we can always assume that everyone is muted until a particular piece or a particular moment of cohesion occurs. Much like the song Air Tune, and what made that such a good recording was that I found a low point between two versions of a song. We played the song twice, and there was a low point in the middle where I cut to begin the next song. And that's why everyone came in and sounded like they were coming in so hot. And that's what we're doing here with this album. We're only bringing people in when they're fiery, when they're hot, when they sound like they're on point, and we're building that in the past. And each of us is going to have a particular role that we play both in the studio and in the narrative. So starting out, Danny Abrams, the voice of the ancestors or the past. I would like this isolation to help bring out more of the clarinet and more of the subtleties and more of the higher and lower noises of the clarinet and the finger key sounds, and no effects, just very dry, that old traditional style. But in the studio, Danny will be the band leader and the CFO. So he can help us isolate parts live while we're playing. While the drums, let's say the drums and cello are playing, he can work with me, or he can work with Drew, or he can work with Saman to actually coordinate a part And then once everyone is on that groove and we've got that horn line and we've got that part together, we just continue playing until it creates a moment of cohesion, and that's the beginning of the song. And of course, keep us on time and under budget. Drew, songwriter, songkeeper, archive these songs. I mean, doing such a good job of it already, of course. And because of the isolation, I want to allow for Drew to have as many effects as possible. Just big muff and wah and phaser and octave, something that can take the dry sound and amplify it into this godlike presence, which leads me to the narrative role, which is the sort of voice of the present, or the voice of God, the voice of that powerful now, and he will move and guide the song with the use of his effects, playing in the forefront and in the background. Saman will be the studio lead, because this is a very unique way of recording. We're going to need someone to watch over us and make sure the mics are all set up correctly and we're moving along correctly and things are recording as necessary. But also he'll be playing the part of one of the percussionists in the percussion section. And particularly in his role, responsible for the texture and quality of the fire. Is it embers? Is it ash? Is it smoke? Is it volcanic fire? Is it a roaring flame? These qualitative elements within this whole scope of what fire can be. And of course, he'll be playing the sort of eye of God or the ear of God, because in the mixing session, at that final capstone of the pyramid, will be the selection of parts and the unmuting and muting of parts later. And the effects for the drum sections are to be decided. Joining him, which would be fantastic, would be Joe McPhail, who could be the percussion lead, who could help the percussion to always stay moving and always stay burning. It might get low, but it always burns, and it add more fuel, and it goes on. And myself will act as creative director, doing that now, outlining the process, but also doing a bit of conducting and helping to lay out actual narrative pieces that we can follow, like we've done in River Tune, and like we've done on some experiments where there can be this stage by stage narrative thrust that gets put in and help identify parts where we can rise and solos can happen, and parts where maybe it's a good time to go into a lull, finding moments of stagnation and turning them around, which leads me to my narrative part, which would be the voice of change, the voice of the future, these sort of raw emotions of the future, the unknown. And I would like to use some kind of chorus effect or something that can build up my sound to help me match more with Drew, but also be a sort of bed for other solos, including drums, to play upon. So this leads me to the unique structure of each piece and ways that we can demarcate where songs occur within the whole uncut recording session of that day. And it works something like this, and it reflects the actual arc of fire itself. We have the raw and wild fire. When it was first introduced to man, it was introduced as lightning striking the ground and or lava erupting and fire spreading. But then we took hold of it and it became channeled and it became predictable. But then, of course, it fades and it turns to ash, just like when we burn bodies or when we burn fuel for our industries. Everything has this life cycle, and the songs too have this life cycle. So if we imagine that, like jazz has heads, that all of our songs will have rhythmic heads, a very simple structure of bump, 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 and everyone will be very on measure, on beat, on point with that. And the melody will be very sparse. It'll just be very exact, even just those notes hitting each point, dot, 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 and we lock into that groove. And then once the drums and the melody section have locked into a groove, the drums can then decouple from the melody, and then the horns and cello become the percussion part, keeping everything on track, and the drums begin to solo. And that wild solo of the drums is the opening of each song, and that moves into then the drums coming out of their solo, going back into the rhythm, and then solos happen throughout the other parts, and then it begins to dissipate and it begins to cool off. and it begins to become like ash and spread. And this is a moment where we can use shakers and noisemakers, and all of the people on melody, the cello and the horns, can use the mouthpieces and make sounds, and it becomes very ethereal and very sparse and very atmospheric, soundscape like. And that would be a very good way of having this wandering kind of melody, this sort of open string section where melodies might spring out. It might be much more beautiful and much more floating and free, offset by those opening, wild, driving, fiery tracks that are sort of like the German, new wave of rock that happened in the 70s. That just ba da 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 sort of noise style, just really driving, almost Africanized kind of drumming and percussion that is offset then by the ending cycle of that beautiful melodic spacey kind of thing. And so that sine wave is what will carry a listener through the album and will help us in the studio process at the end select where those tracks begin and where they end. All in all, it's a very exciting time, and it's a way of working that I've never encountered before, and it's certainly a way of working that we've never tried before, and it will allow us to be much more free and much more open and much more available for new territory. Of course, once it's set in stone in the recording, we can then use that as a reference to play live, and those will become our songs. But the unique part is that we don't actually know what the songs will be until the very end. And I'm very much looking forward to playing with you all. Hope to see you soon.